Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. My name is Sylvain Cortes. As you can hear with my lovely accent, I'm coming from France, not from US. I'm working for a company named Tenable as a security strategist. For them, I'm working in the identity team because I don't know if you are aware about that, but Tenable is famous about vulnerability management, vulnerability scanning, and stuff like that. But we have now some solutions in the identity space. So it's why I joined Tenable 2 years ago. So let's jump directly on the agenda. So today we will talk about AD security, directories, cloud migration. I mean, we will try to embrace everything to answer some sort of question. And the question is the second one. Is that possible to cut the cord with AD? Is that possible to do that? Can we do that if we start our journey to the cloud? So here we will talk about identities and directories. What does it mean? I just want to spend 1 or 2 minutes to be sure everyone is on the same page before to jump on the cloud migration and the AD stuff. So back to the 70s, we were used to use local identities on Unix and Linux system. Then we get the NIST system, and we were able to centralize Unix identity. Plus, during the 90s, we were using NDS from NetWare. I am an NDS boy. I start my career with NDS. And we saw new stuff, LDAP. So even if LDAP is not really a directory category, it's more a protocol, let's call it LDAP directories. Then AD was coming. So it was a huge change because it was a huge gap between NT4 and what AD is providing. Then the cloud is coming, and we start to use some SaaS applications. We start to store some data in the cloud, and then we will need to use some sort of cloud directory to do that. When I'm talking about cloud directories, to make it simple, in fact, you need to use 2 different pieces when you start your journey to the cloud in terms of identities. The first one is the identity as a service piece. So the identity as a service piece is more or less a single sign-on part of your identity in the cloud. The second one is a directory as a service. And we will come back on these two topics later. But to make it simple, directory as a service, in a way, is a cloud directory running as a SaaS service. And you need it to manage your identities before to think about using SaaS application. So what is the situation right now? As you saw, we were using a lot of different directories, identities. But the thing is, we still use it. We didn't delete the old identities we were using. If you are a large organization, you are still using Unix and Linux systems. So for sure, you are using etc password. Perhaps you still use LDAP, on-prem LDAP directories. For sure, you are using AD or ADs because honestly, a lot of organizations are using multiple forests, multiple domains. Perhaps they made some, merge and acquisition process, and they still have a lot of different forests in their organization. And if you start to use the cloud, you have a cloud directory. So as you can imagine, it's really difficult to manage all these different layers because, again, we keep it in a way. So just to be sure, what is AD? So you may think, OK, I know what is AD. But usually, I present AD in 3 different pieces. First one is authentication. Second one is authorization. These 2 pieces are based almost on protocols, which are standards. I mean, almost. But the third one is really what makes AD really special. We are talking here about the GPOs. We are talking about seat awareness. We are talking about global catalogs. We are talking about forest domain concept. And for sure, This third piece is the most important to understand if you want to cut AD. So, why AD is so special? In a way, you are using AD sometimes even if you don't know you are using AD. Because when we are talking about AD, a lot of people are thinking about user and groups. Okay, but it's not only that. You are using AD for managing computers. Perhaps you are doing GPOs. You are using AD to manage user profile. Perhaps you are using the Microsoft DNS, so you have a DNS integration between AD and your DNS organization. Perhaps you are using the PKI from Microsoft, and again, you have a lot of connections between ADCS, which is the Microsoft PKI, and ADDS, which is the real name of AD. So in a way, you are using a lot of different systems which are connected to AD. And why AD is so special? Because of the third part we saw on the previous slide. All this stuff around GPO, specific integration inside AD related to application. So you may think, okay, why do I want to cut AD? I mean, AD is great. I love AD. It works very well. Perhaps it's one of the best Microsoft products running on-prem. Why do I want to cut AD? Hey, just because AD is massively used by ransomware. I mean massively. So we have some statistics. We can say between 60 and 70% of the ransomware are using AD to widespread the organization. So it's really the CISO nightmare. And they understood they are not able, to defeat the beast. So they just want to cut AD. That's really the dream of the CISO. And perhaps you may think, okay, but I'm going to the cloud. So I don't need AD anymore. I mean, I'm using a lot of SaaS application. I'm doing a lot of application migration going to the cloud. I don't need AD anymore. It's not so easy. Why? Just because you are in the middle of the bridge. You just start your cloud journey. And you need to take care about AD during all your migration journey. So when you start to use the cloud, if you think about identities, as I said, in fact, you are using two different pieces. The first one is the IDaaS, the identity as a service part. To make it simple, it's this nice portal. You log in on the portal, and you get all these application logos, and you click on it, and you single sign on to the external application, whatever the application is. Workday, Salesforce, Office 365, Google, whatever. So it's really, in a way, the application of the single sign-on concept provided to the cloud. The second part, which is not directly related to the applications, is the directory as a service. So the directory as a service, if you think about it, it is AD running in the cloud as a cloud service. But again, if you think about it, it means you need to provide all the different pieces which are provided by AD. So it's not only about authentication and authorization. This part is really easy. It's about computer management. It's about what I'm doing with my DNS, what I'm doing with my PKI. And you need to take care about these two different pieces. The difficulty is a lot of different vendors provide both. But perhaps they are good in the first part, and perhaps they are not so good in the second one. We will talk again about it later. Just to provide some examples, and I don't know if you see it very well, but you have some examples. It's screenshots from a pure directory as a service solution, okay? So you can do some user management. You can do some group management. You have the ability, to do some synchronization, migration between your AD on-prem and your directory as a service solution. And you are able to manage computers. And when I'm saying computers, I'm not talking only about workstation, because workstation is relatively easy. I'm talking about all the different computers you can have. And I'm sure you have a lot of servers running on-prem. Here, I try to simplify what you have during your cloud journey. So for sure, you still have a lot of different stuff on-prem. PKI, some LDAP servers, some ADs. Perhaps you still use NIS, which is not a good idea in terms of security, but perhaps you still have some Unix and Linux systems connect to a NIS. Then you start to use the cloud. And here you need the two pieces we were talking about. So the first one is connected to your application, the identity as a service. Again, it's more or less, to make it simple, the single sign-on piece. You need to manage enterprise identities, you need to manage partners' identities, and you need to manage customers' identities. And you have some relation between this piece and the partners, the customers, the end customers, and so on. Then, again, you need the directory as a service piece. And here we are talking about having a cloud directory, which is what we call technically a user store. And in this user store, you will be able to manage user, groups, computers, and why not, certificates, SSH key, DNS, LDAP attributes, almost everything you were able to do with AD on-prem. That's the goal of this kind of solution. And trust me, if you start your journey to the cloud without thinking about this piece, it will be a nightmare in months or in years, because you will miss something. So, if we talk about directory as a service solution, I will present a slide, but I just want to warn you, I'm not an analyst, you know? So this slide is really based on my own experience about the projects I was done. It's not really an analyst work. And perhaps you will find some mistakes, and perhaps you will not agree with the content. But that's really my personal view. So I put on this slide 4 different vendors. And again, I'm not working for these vendors, so I'm really happy to talk about it. And again, you are able to find other vendors which provide directory as a service. The thing is, I know these 4 guys because I was doing a lot of projects with these 4 solutions. And as I don't know the other one, I will not be able to provide accurate information and feedback. So I will still focus on this one. So first, Microsoft. Perhaps you notice it, but I am a Microsoft MVP, so I know quite well the Microsoft offer, for sure. So Microsoft is providing both IDaaS and directory as a service, and they provide a piece which is named Azure AD, which is, as you may know, not at all AD running in Azure, you know, marketing name. So Microsoft made a decision, which is to not include the computer management directly inside Azure AD. So they provide another piece, which is named Intune, or whatever they call it right now. So the idea here is really to have the computer management in a separate solution, which is Intune. So if you are using only Azure AD is providing directory as a service plus IDaaS, depending the level of what you buy. And they are coming from the IDaaS world. Second one is JumCloud. JumCloud is an American-based company. And from the really beginning, they decide to focus only on directory as a service. So they don't care about, you know, this single sign-on portal. They provide something, but it's not very good. They really focus on directory as a service, okay? And inside the solution, you can do almost everything you are able to do with AD on-prem, including DNS, computer management, providing an LDAP as a service stuff. It's very strong, but you need to understand it will take care only about the directory as a service solution, and you may need to use another piece to do the single sign-on. The 2 other guys, for me, are very similar. I mean, if I'm looking what they provide, it's really almost the same. Perhaps Okta provides some additional stuff because they made the acquisition of Auth0, but here it's more for the application side, for the identity as a service side. If we are focusing on the directory as a service, it's almost the same. And again, they made the choice to not invest a lot in the computer management side. So remember, we said directory as a service is everything. User, groups, PKI, DNS, whatever, and computer management. So as you imagine, you can imagine, it's really tricky to make a choice. Because this choice will follow you in the future years. So, can you finally replace AD? If you want to do that, you need to achieve 3 very important tasks. First one, which is obvious, is you need to eliminate all the different applications and services which are connected to AD. And here, I want to make a focus on the services, because applications, it's relatively easy. You have a CRM application on-prem connected to AD, you move to, I don't know, Salesforce or whatever. You have something else. You can move it very easily. But as soon as we are talking about services like printers, like file sharing, all this old stuff you are using in your organization, it's not so easy. For sure, if you are a very new company, you start your journey to the cloud immediately, so you don't use file server. You're using, I don't know, OneDrive, Google Drive, whatever. But if you are an old company, you still have this kind of stuff on-prem. And if you want to cut AD, you need to cut this kind of services, or you need to migrate this kind of services to something else in the cloud, which is not so easy, trust me. Second one is, in a lot of situations, organizations will need to review what they did in terms of IAM system. Why? Because they made a huge mistake. A lot of organizations were thinking AD has an IAM system. It is not. It is just a technical directory. But they try, to use AD to manage profile and to do this synchronization with application, database, and so on. So if they want to cut AD, for sure, they will need to change everything. They will need to change all their IAM process. That's a classic mistake. The third one is about computer management. Because when you start your conversation with some consultant, they will talk about what they call modern workplace. But in their mind, they are thinking about the desktop, not the servers. Desktop, workstations, it's easy, really easy. But again, if you are talking about servers like Unix, Linux, different flavors of Linux, a lot of different kind of servers, perhaps you have some NAS which are connected to AD and so on. How do you move this stuff and how do you manage this stuff when you are going to the cloud? You need to think about it, and when you think about computer management and modern workplace, you need to include servers as well in your project. And again, these 3 tasks are very difficult to achieve. So here you have like a sort of planning. And again, perhaps you are not agree with me. That's fine. We can discuss about it later. But when I have a conversation with a customer, I'm used to say, you have 2 versions of the life. You have the PowerPoint version and the real-life version. So what I try to do is a real-life version on PowerPoint slide. And I will not comment everything because you will be able to download the slide. But if we are thinking about a classic company who want to cut AD, the good planning is about 10 years. So if you start right now to think about, put AD in the trash, we can imagine it will take 10 years. If you are a large organization, for sure, it's not 10 years. It's 15 years. It's 20 years. I don't know. So what I mean by that is it's really something important. It's really something complex to achieve. So if you want to do it, you need to think about it right now. So some takeaways, as usual. First one is, if you want to do it, begin your project right now, because it will take time. You have no idea about all the different tasks you need to achieve to do that. So think about it, create a project, and start your migration to the cloud in terms of directory as a service stuff. Second one is, if you are a large organization, let's make a bet. Let's meet in this same conference in 10 years. And I'm almost sure you will still have 80 in your environment, for sure. And perhaps we can make the bet for 20 years. Because more large your organization is, more specific stuff you will have to manage. Perhaps you have some old OT system connected to AD. Perhaps you have some complex industrial stuff which are connected to AD. Perhaps you are using very old stuff like old Unix system. So you will need to manage all this stuff. And it will take time. If you are a bank, for example, some of your systems run from 20 years, 30 years. Next point is about, you go to the cloud, you want to use a directory as a service solution. And for sure, if you want to do that, please, in your next project, don't buy a new application which is connected to AD. Perhaps you think it's an obvious stuff, but trust me, based on my experience, it's not so obvious. And it's not so easy, because a lot of vendors still provide some stuff connected to AD. So if you do that, for sure, it will add more and more stuff in your bucket. Next point is about AD security. That's my favorite topic. I'm doing AD security from now 22 years. That's really my specialty. And it's really tricky. Why? Because when I have a conversation with a CISO, he says to me, OK, I want to cut AD. And the good news is I don't need to take care about AD security anymore. Wait. You will still use AD during 10 years from now. Even if your dream is to cut AD and put it away. But this doesn't happen. It means you will be able to take care, you will need to take care about your AD security, you will need to take care about AD, or the ransomware will take care about AD for you. So you need really to take care about your AD security during your cloud migration, cloud journey. Because trust me, when you got ransomware which is using AD and trash everything, that's a real nightmare. Because if the ransomware is taking control of AD, it's, game over. Final point, which is not really a technical point, which is interesting and I think important to, to cover, is about people. Right now, it's really difficult to find good consultants with a good knowledge about AD security. Really, it's really difficult. So let's imagine in 10 years. It will be really, really, really difficult to find people who know about AD, who know about AD security, who have the history of your company, who understand what was done inside your AD in terms of specific attributes, specific value, and so on. And you need to take care about this stuff right now. Because in the past, if you think about what happened with netware, it was exactly the same thing. I was still doing some netware migration 10 years ago, and perhaps in France, we were 5 people who were able to do that. So think about it, especially because young people, they want to do fancy stuff like DevOps, like the metaverse stuff from Facebook and so on, and they don't care about on-prem stuff anymore. So it will be difficult, more and more difficult, to find people to take care about your AD. I think we are on time. Thank you very much for your attention. Yes?
So, I get the idea of getting rid of AD, moving to the cloud.
in a way, you're right. I mean, we start to see some stuff like that. We start to see specific attacks running on Azure, running against Okta for sure. And so we start to see this kind of stuff. But the thing is, if you think about all the different attacks which are running against AD, it's mainly based on old protocol. So like Kerberos or NTLM. And we are not using this kind of stuff when we are using the cloud. It doesn't mean we'll not see this kind of stuff because, for example, I saw a customer and he had a problem. Because when you authenticate against the cloud, you get a sort of ticket, which is a JSON ticket in your browser, okay? And the concept is, in a way, very similar about what you get when you get the Kerberos ticket. So if you are able to catch this information from the memory, you are able to do some stuff and use, in fact, another identity. So we start to see this kind of stuff. And you're right, in the future, I mean, more and more people will use directory as a service, so the attackers will concentrate their attack against this kind of stuff. And they will find something, for sure. That's life. Another question? I was so clear. Perfect.
So I guess in your scenario, you're basically going to build a second directory service and you're going to migrate everything over to it. There's no migrating what you have. You're going to
Yeah. Thank you very much.